I do think that the divisions in our country today are between elites and non-elites, between the establishment and regular people. Uh, I have no I have no deep-seated philosophical commitment to the Republican Party. I just happen to think it is the best vehicle for those who have a more conservative viewpoint to try to nominate and elect candidates of our persuasion. That said, having worked in both the U.S. Senate and worked in the House, Washington has a way of changing people. So I think individuals, both left and right, go to Washington with ideals, with principles, but they very soon get subsumed, mostly by the need to get reelected. So if you're a congressman or a congresswoman and you're an incumbent, you're spending 5 nights a week in Washington, D.C. on the fundraising circuit, out trying to scrape up the money to get reelected. I'm a firm believer in term limits. I think term limits would be a very positive thing. Limit people to 6 years in the House or 8 years in the House. Limit U.S. senators to 2 terms in the Senate. That would be 12 years. Have a constant flow of new people and fresh blood to the process. I think that would be a positive development. If you look at the polling across the board, Republicans and Democrats, people are overwhelmingly in favor of the concept, but you're never going to get term limits because the people in charge of implementing them have no interest in leaving power. So the short answer is yes, I do think that there's a ruling elite that transcends both parties, that does dominate public affairs, and I think they do it to the detriment, in many cases, of the average citizen.
Awesome
Excellent.
answer. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and bring up another user named Jacob. So here's him, and he shall ask his question shortly. You have to accept the invitation to speak. Okay, well, I guess not. I actually have a question in the meantime. Mr. Stone, who would you say is enemy number one in the Republican Party? Focused on which rhino would you say is enemy number one? Who do we have to get rid of as quickly as possible?
That would have to be Mitch McConnell, who I think is, here's a perfect example of someone who came to public office relatively poor, who's made tens of millions of dollars through his business activities in China. I'm not a big fan of Kevin McCarthy either, the would-be House Speaker. I think that there should be stark differences between the parties. So those two would be my nominee.
I see.
So Dina says she's ready now. So I'm going to try this again, Dina. Just accept the invite when you're ready. There she is.
There we go.
Can you speak?
Oh, we lost her again.
Yeah, I think she might be having issues. See, Rodger, it's not so bad. I think Dina's like in her 20s and she can't figure this out either. So instead, let's go to Michael. Michael, I'm going to pull you in. We have like 2 seconds here. Whenever you're ready, Michael.
Hi there. So we're not allowed to ask any of the really fun questions, so that's kind of boring. But so I'll ask this instead. You've been in lobbying and campaigns for decades now. Pulling from that experience, what do you have to comment on the idea or the feeling that a large amount of American citizens have that their government and their public institutions are not working for them? Yeah.
Well, I haven't worked as a lobbyist in over 30 years, just to be clear. I'm not really interested in government. I'm more interested in politics, the science of winning public office. When I was a lobbyist, I wasn't very good at it. But I would make the observation that in Washington, D.C., if you have enough money and if you have the right lobbyists and paid for connections, virtually anything whatsoever can be purchased. And I think that's a bad thing. So I do think that our government institutions and major, multilateral corporations who can spend without limitation have perverted the system, which is why I never intend to work as a lobbyist again. I didn't like it. I wasn't good at it. Uh, it's not really. It's again. That's the governmental process that I have very little interest in.
Okay, we're gonna try Landon again. I hope that he figured his stuff out this time. Here he is.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, my question is for Mr. Stone. How did he get to his process on writing Stone's rules? Like, what is his writing process?
Okay, good question. I wanted to write a book that would be valuable to everybody, that was based on the things that I had learned in 40 years in the public arena. It's not an ideological book. The examples I use are obviously from my own career, but I think the book would be of interest and value whether you were a progressive or a liberal or a Democrat or non-political or a Republican or a conservative or a libertarian. I also think it would be valuable to you regardless of your chosen profession. Doesn't matter whether it would be tech or the arts or agriculture. It doesn't matter what it is. These are just things that I compiled over the years from personal experience. Two individuals really pushed me to finally publish this book, which without exaggeration was probably 25 years in the making. Essentially, I was just collecting string. In other words, I had a notebook and I would write down observations that I had based on experiences that I had. Mike Smerconish at CNN, a friend of mine. We don't agree on politics. We used to, but he's kind of moved left. I still respect him enormously. Think he's a very talented and smart guy. Urged me to write this. Tucker Carlson was the other individual, friend of mine of more than 30 years, I guess. Both urged me to write it. I'm not a very quick typist, so I prefer to dictate everything and then have it corrected or edit it myself, but that's really the process. Writing a book, and I've written 5, is far more difficult than you might think, particularly if you're a perfectionist. And therefore, there are times when I would go back and rewrite the same section 3 or 4 times until I was satisfied with it. I do recommend it. My first book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, it's about the Kennedy assassination. Very, very heavily footnoted and documented in the back. I took that book to 6 different publishers, all of whom told me it had no commercial appeal whatsoever, that no one would ever buy it, and it became a New York Times bestseller. And even today, without much promotion or advertising, that book still makes me money. You can be skeptical if you want, but I urge you to read the book before you form an opinion. I think I make a very compelling case using eyewitness evidence, fingerprint evidence, deep Texas politics, and a lot that has not yet been assembled in one place, but reported elsewhere, to make the case that there was, in fact, a plot that involved the man who benefited the most, Lyndon Johnson, the military-industrial complex, including the Pentagon, our intelligence services, the Secret Service, organized crime, and big Texas oil to murder John F. Kennedy. I did not have the appreciation for President Kennedy that I have today, that I did not have that appreciation in the 60s and the 70s. I do think had he survived, he would have gone down as one of our greatest presidents. But he and his brother were challenging the status quo, the military-industrial complex of their time. I think it is one of the great tragedies that he ran as a pro-civil rights candidate in 1960, but his vice president, Lyndon Johnson, talked him out of more aggressive civil rights legislation in his first term, a Voting Rights Act, an Open Housing Act, a Voter Registration Act, on the theory that the Senate committee chairmen in those days were all Southerners, and they would kill his budget and the rest of his program. Of course, immediately upon Kennedy's death, Lyndon Johnson would recast himself. He was a lifelong segregationist who, as Senate Majority Leader, had killed every piece of civil rights legislation. But through his commitment to civil rights, he also got the ability to plunge us far deeper into Vietnam without criticism from the left wing of his own party. So if you haven't read the book, I strongly recommend it. It reads like a murder mystery purposely. I stand by its conclusions, and as I said, pretty heavily documented.
I have a follow-up question for Benjamin. He's always advocating for your stone rules, and I would like to ask you on like how he feel like how it's helped him in his life.
Well, thank you for the question.
That'd be a question for him, not for me.
I'll answer that quickly. Well, I have a rather rags to riches story, and I can say that the rules are more life lessons on success, ambition, self-responsibility. If you're going to read it, I recommend that you do. I think that it can really push you in the right direction. Make sure you get yourself a signed copy so you know it has some sentimental value. And it teaches the lesson that a man is not finished when he is defeated. He is only finished when he quits. So I highly recommend that everybody read that, and I think that it will really add success to your life. But thank you for the question, Landon.
Awesome. Thank you, Lyndon. So I've actually got, I'm going to steal a question for myself, if that's okay. So you've been kind of painted as like a very Machiavellian figure, kind of like this man in the shadows pulling the strings from behind the Republican Party for like decades, right? And I wonder how you feel about that representation being out there, like that being there, the caricature they've created about you. And because you've kind of gloated about, hey, if they hate me, it means I'm effective, right? And I think there's obviously some truth to that. So do you kind of like is that a sign to you that the work you're doing is impactful and you're doing the right thing, or do you feel like they're like painting you some kind of like evil like monster? And was there anything you think you could do to change that portrayal? And if you could, would you want to?
Well, if you went to Twitter right now, you could see the ravings of a bunch of menopausal harpies who insist that I am the root of all evil, that I am the mastermind of the January 6th insurrection. Sorry, wasn't there, don't know anything about it. That I was behind Trump's claim of a stolen election. Actually, we never talked about the results of the election at all in the post-election period. I mean, they blame me for everything, including the assassination of Abraham Lincoln at this point. I believe that one has to deal with the situation not as you would like it to be, but as it is. Remember that not only was I charged with lying to Congress about Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, which we now know definitively did not happen, but for 2.5 years, my patriotism, my loyalty to the country was challenged. I was accused of being a Russian asset, of working with Russians for the election of Trump. There was never any evidence of that, not presented at my trial, not what I was charged with. I was charged with lying about things that we now know definitively didn't happen. Only in D.C. Could this happen. And therefore, the dirty trickster, let me get this exactly right. The self-proclaimed dirty trickster. Actually, I've never proclaimed myself to be that. I actually got the LA Times to print a retraction because I've never described myself that way. Others have. The other one is the convicted felon. Well, unfortunately for them, my felony conviction is voided by the unconditional presidential pardon that I received. So at this point, I'm a polarizing figure. When you go through a crucible like I've been through, you find out who your real friends are. You find out who the people are who pretended to be your friends when it was in their best interest, but were never really your friends at all. Many, 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 many of them in the mainstream media. People who I helped, help their children get into school, help them get a job promotion, help them get information allowing them to break a big story, therefore advance in their career. There's almost kind of a direct inverse proportion. The more I did to help you, the faster and more vicious they were in their attacks on me. And the most unfair part, of course, is I was gagged by a federal judge. I couldn't even respond to criticism. It doesn't seem very fair to me. No place in federal law does it say if you're charged with a crime that you lose your First Amendment rights to free speech. I now see that Peter Navarro is being gagged by the judge. Now, there is some distinction here. I was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee, and I fulfilled my legal obligations under the subpoena. I showed up, and I invoked my Fifth Amendment rights not to answer questions, not because I did anything wrong, not because I had anything to hide, but because I had almost recently had direct experience with the ability to twist what you say, no matter how innocuous, no matter how immaterial, no matter how unimportant, no matter whether it was or was not covering some underlying crime, and turn that into a process crime. And therefore, that was not a risk I was going to take. Navarro, Steve Bannon, a man who should be rushed immediately to a dermatologist and a haberdasher, and should be introduced to hot water and soap, in my opinion. These guys chose to thumb their nose at the subpoena, and I think that is unwise. If they didn't want to answer questions, they had a constitutional right not to, but to just ignore the subpoena was to invite a contempt citation for which they now have serious legal jeopardy. The argument that they don't have to testify, the two arguments, that the January 6th committee is improperly constituted, the courts have ruled against that. My opinion is not important. I happen to agree that it is improperly constituted, but the courts have ruled otherwise. So be it. And then secondarily, the argument that that executive privilege prevents them from being required to testify. Well, Bannon was a former federal employee, so I don't know how executive privilege would cover his activities after he had left the service of the president. And in the case of Navarro, we'll see how that legal argument works. I also agree with the argument that President Biden cannot waive the executive privilege put forward by the previous president in a previous period. The chronology of that seems to me to be legally problematic, but then I'm not an attorney.
Thank you so much for that answer.
I'm going to steal a question because I think this is something that everyone should hear. Now, I know we've talked about this, Mr. Stone, but one of your most famous things on the internet, I think, is when you and Alex stormed the Young Turks. If you kind of want to talk about, what kind of went on there and some of the scandalous liberal, I guess you could say, tricks that they tried to pull there, I think that would be very interesting for people to hear.
Well, that got a huge number of hits on social media. A lot of people saw it. But to be very clear, we were at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. Alex Jones, who's quite an entertaining fellow, and I were walking through the media section, and a woman who Jones knew, who was a producer for the Young Turks, asked us to come by their set and to stop by for their broadcast. Jones had been on with the Young Turks previously as an invited guest several times. So he said, I know these guys. This will be good. We'll have a dialogue. Let's go do it. I was pretty unsure, so I kind of hung back. And then, of course, as many people have seen, as soon as he was on the set, the same woman who invited us, woman wearing a red dress, started screaming that we had crashed their broadcast. We didn't crash their broadcast. I can only be seen kind of off on the side until Chunky Yogurt, or whatever his name is, started yelling at me that I was a liar. And I said, what did I lie about? And he said, Elliot Spitzer. Well, Elliot Spitzer resigned as governor of New York because he was caught patronizing prostitutes. The issue, by the way, is not patronizing prostitutes. As a libertarian, I think that prostitution should probably be legalized and even regulated. But as Attorney General, he was locking up people who were patronizing prostitutes. At the same time, he was doing the same thing. So his sin was hypocrisy. Anyway, that is the background, just proving that not everything is the way it appears on the internet.
That was a great answer. That was a great response.
Now, next up, I'm going to go to my friend Star. Star, if you're in, you just need to raise your hand in the stage. If I don't see it. Yeah, there you are. Okay. So Star actually happens to be a Twitch streamer, a political Twitch streamer. So she had a few questions for you, if that's okay. Star, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I guess the first question I had, it's kind of related to Doobie's question. When did you first start noticing claims of being like a dirty trickster going around about you? And secondly, when you first started noticing them, did they have any effect on you?
They started when I started winning elections on behalf of my candidates. Politics is a sharp-edged game. It's not beanbag. I am, by my own admission, I am one of the originators of the comparative television or radio ad, where you take the record of your opponent and compare it to your own positions. So I chalk it up to partisanship. The people calling me a dirty trickster are usually people I had defeated in an election. Do I like it? Do I dislike it? It's almost immaterial. It's going to be on my tombstone, whether I like it or not. I just think it is it's an attribute of our current polarized system. People, what does bother me, and I don't like, is, well, you're a white supremacist. Let's take that for a moment, if we may. When I was working for Ronald Reagan, he decided not to extend the Voting Rights Act, which ensured the voting rights of African Americans in the South. I disagreed with that. I wrote an op-ed for the Washington Times disagreeing with it. I support affirmative action. Affirmative action is a program which gives preferences to African Americans in federal contracting, in education, in job hiring, and so on. I think people who've been discriminated against should get some leg up in the future system. It's a very, very unpopular position among conservatives, but I support it. I think the war on drugs is one big, ignominious, racist disaster. I think that the harsh mandatory penalties for the possession of small amounts of drugs by people with no previous criminal records has fallen disproportionately on the backs of poor people and people of color. But Richard Nixon's war on drugs was aimed at drug traffickers and drug dealers. It is Senate Judiciary Chairman Joe Biden and President Bill Clinton seeking to look tough for a round of elections that gave you the turbocharged war on drugs. I think that the criminal justice system is rigged against African Americans. I think it should be fixed. So this notion of just calling names based on an assumption is just wrong. I'm a 30-year advocate for the legalization of cannabis. I do think it has medicinal value. I think the great health problem in this country today are opioids. There's your health crisis. And believe me, many of my conservative friends don't agree with my positions in this area, but people just want to put you in a box. They don't really want to stop and focus on your views. Same-sex marriage is another example. When we had a constitutional amendment in Florida which would have banned it, I was opposed to that. I think each individual should make their own decision. I wrote an editorial against it. I campaigned against it. Unfortunately, the ban passed very, very narrowly. So I'm not a knee-jerk right-winger. I'm a libertarian. I think a lot of my positions might surprise you, but nobody bothers to ask. They just jump to conclusions. And that's what I don't like.
If I can steal another question, a lot of times people on this server debate and say that Joe Biden is not responsible for gas spikes. Could you elaborate to the people, if you believe that Joe Biden is responsible,
Well,
why he
closing
is
down the
responsible?
Keystone Pipeline and curtailing all of the domestic exploration and drilling, not to mention closing down the drilling in the Arctic, are directly responsible for the fact that we now are back to buying oil from our adversaries. We're buying it from friends and adversaries. So we're back to buying oil from the Saudis, which we did not have to do under Trump, buying oil from the Russians, in essence, financing the war in Ukraine for them, even buying oil potentially from the Chinese. At the same time, Trump had the Russian pipeline turned off. Now, under Biden, it's turned back on. So I would argue that the policies of this administration, the anti-fossil fuel policies of this administration, have led to the gas prices. I drove from Fort Lauderdale to Ocala, Florida on Saturday, and it actually cost me $100 to fill my tank. People keep saying $6 gas. I don't know where that is. Gas here in the part of Florida where I live is 6 and change, closer to 7, and that's expensive. $100 to fill your gas tank. That's pretty shocking.
I see. Okay, let's look for someone else to bring up. Let me find them.
I've got somebody ready to go.
Okay, go ahead.
This is from Lily. Lily, whenever you're ready.
Hi. Hello, Mr. Stone.
Your mic is a
Hello.
little bit low. Can you get a little closer?
Yeah, of course. Is that better?
Much better.
Yeah, I'm horrible in British. I apologize. So my question was, you were once quoted as saying, "By night, I'm trafficking in the dark arts. Nixon's people were obsessed with intelligence." So with the advent of scandals such as like Cambridge Analytica and other data mining, analysis, and brokerage, do you think your role in the Nixon campaign helped shape this political landscape we're currently seeing? And as a follow-on, do you think the advent of these new ways of accessing so much data, how do you think it's changed the landscape, and how do you intend to navigate that new landscape?
Well, let's take this in parts. The people around Nixon were fueled by a paranoia that I think was born out of the tactics that were used on them in the 1960 election. John and Robert Kennedy played rough. There's evidence that Nixon himself was wiretapped in 1960. There is no question that organized crime played a substantial role in the very, very narrow election of John Kennedy. I've documented this in my book, The Rise and Fall and Rise of Richard M. Nixon. It's also extremely well documented in a multi-part series in the the Herald Tribune, which you cannot find online, but I was able to find in microfiche. And therefore that bred in them a unnecessary paranoia. They had this appetite for intelligence regardless of how completely worthless the intelligence or gossipy the intelligence might be. I don't know anything about Cambridge Analytica. I've read about it. You might check in with Steve Bannon on that. I know nothing about it. I do think that there are available from public sources an extraordinary number of data points on every single individual. And therefore, through modeling and using entirely publicly available data, you can select and therefore target for messaging individual voters. So this brings a level of sophistication to politics that we never had previously. Now you add to that the extraordinary efficiency, but also the inexpensive nature of the internet and text messaging, I might add. And those things, I think, have changed our politics very, very dramatically. What does it mean? Well, if you were a woman and you wanted to run for Congress in, say, Dallas or New York or Philadelphia, it would be prohibitively expensive because the most efficient method of communications would be network television, and network television advertising in those markets cost an enormous amount of money. Therefore, only people who had personal wealth or people who could get extraordinary wealth from special interests were able to be viable as candidates. The advent of social media, particularly Facebook, the sophistication in which we can identify and reach people through internet, through email, through text messages, I think has brought down the costs dramatically of being able to run a sophisticated, viable campaign for state or federal office. And therefore, I consider it to be a positive development.
I see. Well, I'm happy to say we have around 5,000 listeners right now, 500 here, and there's a lot of big streamers streaming. There's a spam train going on in the chat right now saying Stone 2024. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Stone? Have you ever thought about a presidential run, or are you just going to stick to the political consultant and advisor man behind the shadows? If you're talking, we can't hear you. I think your audio cut out.
Yeah, maybe you knocked him off his chair with that question.
I think so. I shot him a text.
Okay. There
He's
you are.
back. Did you hear the question, Mr. Stone?
I did not. Everything just went completely blank. So start over again.
Well, I said, first, we're happy to inform that we have around 5,000 people listening. We have 500 here, and a few thousand are being streamed elsewhere on other platforms. But there's a spam train going on in the discussion chat saying Stone 2024. What is your response to that? People are encouraging you to run for office in 2024.
I believe me, I am not running for office. I have more skeletons in the graveyard. So I have politics is for a certain type of person, someone who suffers fools gladly. I really don't do that. I'm also not interested in government. I'm interested in the science of electing people to office. I do encourage people who are dissatisfied with their government today to consider running for office. I do think that until you've been elected, until you've helped elect somebody sheriff, you can't understand how to elect a U.S. senator or even a president. And I do think that there is some value in starting at the bottom, but I have no intention of being a candidate for public office anytime soon. I thank those people for their support, however.
This is a pleasure to talk to you, Mr. Storn. I wanted to ask you, are we ever getting Roger Storn merch? I've been wanting to have a Roger Storn Did Nothing T-shirt for a very long time.
We've had some supply chain oriented problems, but my advice to you would be to go to rogerstoneStore.com, rogerstoneStore.com. That is one way. The other way is to go to my website, stonecoldtruth.com, and go to the shop there. And t-shirts available in both places. And I think they are back in stock. Like many people in many industries, we too have had trouble getting the actual t-shirts. So the problem is not applying the art to the t-shirt. The problem is getting the t-shirt itself. But I'm told everything is now back in stock, and wear it in good health.
Excellent.
Awesome.
There's also mugs as well. You can sip the
There are
liberal tears in
mugs,
the morning.
there are stones. I've signed a stone with my first name, Rodger. That makes it a Rodger stone. It's a paperweight. I sold more than 15,000 of these to finance my legal defense. You can get a signed copy of the presidential pardon that the president gave me. You can get a copy of the photo of me being arrested. It's particularly enjoyable now because the FBI agent who arrested me is now under investigation himself for having changed documents fraudulently in the indictments of Carter Page and George Papadopoulos. So you can get any of those items. Also, my book, Stone's Rules, available at stonecoldtruth.com in the store, as well as my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ. My book on the Bush crime family is temporarily out of print. I'm arguing with the publisher that they should reissue it. I'm hopeful that that will happen soon.
I
Awesome.
believe you're going to be giving Abraham. You're going to be giving away some copies of Stone's Rules too.
Yes,
Correct?
I was just going to mention that. So at the end of this AMA, I'm going to be giving away 10 free copies of that. Well, free to you, but I'm gonna, I'll get you guys free copies of that. And Rodger, if you will, do us the pleasure of signing those, that'd be amazing.
I would be more than happy to do that.
So I'm going to pull on the next person. This is his name is Steven, goes by Destiny Online. He's another one of these really large, very popular, very famous political streamers. And he had a couple questions for you. So Steven, whenever you're ready.
Hey, Roger. I'm just curious, when you look at all of the kind of electioneering stuff that you're involved in, you talk about how you're in the science of electing people. Do you ever think at the end of the day, like morally, like any of the consequences of the people that you've gotten elected, has any of it turned out to where you either regret working for somebody or you're really happy, like morally with how something turned out, or do you just not even factor that in? Or you're there to win, move on to the next thing, and you don't really care one way or another what happens?
No, in fact, I have written extensively about the fact that I was never a Bush Republican. I was called into the recount for the election of George W. Bush. I was opposed to the Iraq War. I think the Iraq War was an enormous mistake. I think the reasons that we were given for the Iraq War were false. Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. Saddam Hussein did not have yellow cake uranium. Those are all falsifications by Dick Cheney and other neocons. And therefore, I deeply regret having assisted George W. Bush in becoming president. How's that?
Yeah, I guess that's good. Looking forward to like future stuff. I don't want to take too much time. When you're trying to evaluate future candidates, so obviously like somebody like Donald Trump is incredibly controversial. Are there things that you've learned from past people you've supported where you're like, this is a red flag? Even if I seem like I like this guy, I'm not going to support him because I'm worried that it might go bad in the future. Not necessarily for you, but just in terms of what you would like, the direction you'd like to see the country head.
Well, look, Trump is a unique individual, and on paper, he should not have been electable. Normally speaking, when a candidate is extraordinarily polarizing, they're harder to elect. In this particular case, Hillary Clinton turned out to be every bit as polarizing as Donald Trump. But Trump's unfavorable rating exceeded his favorable rating among voters on the day he was elected president. I've never seen that before. That's a new phenomena. Generally speaking, you want candidates who have an overwhelmingly favorable rating, and you obviously need candidates with access to resources. It is a sad fact that the cost of political advertising is astronomical, whether it be cable or radio, which are still the most efficient and dominant forms of communications. This has been leavened, as I said earlier, somewhat by the internet, by social media, which is less expensive but also less efficient. So we've never elected a president before who wasn't a governor or a senator or a general. So there's yet another rule that has been broken. So I guess the rule is there really are no rules. I think anything is possible in America today. I do think that there's a cross pollination of pop culture and our politics, and therefore somebody, let's take Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, who is known because they're an entertainer, or in his case, an athlete, if you will, makes the transition easily to politics. And therefore, the greatest single quality for a man or woman who wants to run for public office is being well known, is starting off as well known. This was Trump's greatest advantage going into 2016. He was certainly running against people with substantially more experience than he had at the art of politics, of the game of politics. But the enormous advantage he had is because of years and years and years of self-promotion, he was extremely well known and he was a known commodity. Whereas if you went out in the street in front of your house right now and you ask the first three people who you know who Marco Rubio is, they're going to tell you they have no idea, despite the fact that he's running for his third term, I guess, in the U.S. Senate. So it is, the intersection of pop culture and our politics is significant, and becoming extremely well known, if you don't have resources, is very difficult to do, and therefore viability is very tough to achieve.
Okay. If I can do one final one, I guess, real quick.
Sure.
Have you ever approached a candidate that you wanted to support, but because of your background, you're so controversial, they didn't want to work with you? Is there like a way that you overcame that, or do you don't care and you just move on, or are you so effective that your reputation doesn't really hamper your ability to work with other campaigns?
Well, I mean, there's a distinction there. There's a difference between support and work for. In other words, I have worked as a political strategist and what they call a GC, a general consultant. I'm making most of my living today writing and speaking and analyzing politics. I'm helping a few candidates, but that's a very, very difficult and competitive business. It's not what I choose to do at this point in my life. I'm entitled to support anybody I want, support it as in vote for, support as in say on social media that I support candidates. I have never had a situation in which I pursued a potential client and got turned down. What you see is what you get. That's really not what I'd prefer to be doing right now. As I said, I prefer to talk about it, write about it, analyze it, and so on.
Thank you so much.
Are we ready for Steve? I'll bring him up here then. Let me find him.
Oh, there's another Steve. Okay.
Ito.
I think he's coming. I found him. There you are.
Hey, Roger. I had just a couple quick questions. First off, I was wondering if you had anything like Telegram or your own Discord or anything that we could possibly do.
I definitely have a lively feed on Telegram. I have a lively feed on Gab. I have a lively feed on Truth Social. I, of course, am banned for life on Twitter, banned for life on Facebook, banned for life on Instagram because I'm obviously the most dangerous person in the world. The Taliban's not banned, but I'm banned. But you can follow me in any of those places. By the way, I love the Tim Curry avatar. Very cool.
Thank you, thank you. Um, I was wondering if also you could comment about this. Now, I agree with President Trump about almost everything, but there's one thing about him that really disturbs me, and I wanted to get your opinion about it. He eats his steaks cooked well and with ketchup.
It's an abomination, isn't it? It's an
It
abomination.
is.
So I have a wager with him uh, over a certain election. I won't say specifically which one, but an upcoming primary. And he said, "I'll tell you what. I'll bet you a steak dinner at Bedminster." And I said, "I'll tell you what. Let's make it meatloaf because I know he will not only order his steak well done, but also order mine well done."
That's great.
That's an abomination. By the way, the meatloaf at Bedminster or at Mar-Lago is extraordinary. If you're a fan of such things, and I am.
So, being an advisor to Trump, have you ever communicated this with them about how uh, he's committing a food crime, basically, every time he eats a steak? Have you ever tried to, like, for your public image, you need to eat your steaks differently?
I have to admit to you that I haven't, but anytime you're with Donald Trump, he does most of the talking and you do most of the listening. He's a man of strong opinions. He has particularly strong opinions about food, as I'm sure you know. He loves McDonald's. He loves Kentucky Fried Chicken. He loves Burger King. I would not eat in any of those places. I'm pretty careful about my diet. I like to live to a ripe old age. On the other hand, I knew both of Donald's parents. They lived in and were vital into their middle 90s. And he has an extraordinary amount of stamina when you consider that even when he plays golf, he rides in the cart. And his diet is, shall we say, not what I would choose. So he does function on 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. Pretty amazing in itself. Um, and he has an enormous amount of physical energy and stamina, considering how disastrous his diet is.
That's great, sir. Thank you.
And we'll post the Telegram and the links and whatnot in the announcements, right, Abe? We'll get that
Here,
sorted.
Yeah,
here's an
yeah, absolutely.
Here's an interesting thing. I have 19,000 followers and change in Telegram. That number never ever changes. It never goes up. It never goes down. It just kind of hangs right there. And I find that really, really odd. When I do post there, I'll get 1,000, 2,000, sometimes 3,000. Somehow as many as 6,000 people will read what I post. So I can't explain whether I am shadow banned or why I seem to get no new followers at Telegram. My friend Laura Loomer says every time she gets to 35,000, they will almost all get erased and she starts back at zero again, which is very, very odd. But anybody who wants to keep up with what I'm up to, I welcome you to follow me on Telegram.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Steve. So I've got a question from another streamer friend of mine. His name is Max. It's Max, as soon as I can find you, I'll pull you in. There you are. Okay, Max, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Roger.
Greetings.
I was wondering if I could actually ask you for some advice, kind of political, personal advice. Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I am hated not so widely as you, but perhaps as deeply. I've been arrested, I've been banned, I've been suspended, everything. A lot of the same things as you. I'm very provocative, and I'm wondering. I think it's easier to provoke anger or hate, to turn people against each other or against yourself, as I have done, and I think you have done to some degree. We can probably agree. But I feel like the country is at a point where it is dangerously polarized. And I'm wondering what you think the message would be that people need to hear to reduce polarization rather than increase it. If there's something, if you can use your political craftsmanship to come up with the narrative that people need to hear to kind of disarm.
It's a difficult question. I mean, I will certainly concede that I'm hated. I'm also loved. 85,000 individual Americans contributed to my legal defense fund. I spoke to 700 people in Ocala this weekend. I spoke to 3,000 people in Myrtle Beach not long ago. Very happy to have my presentation. So kind of goes with the territory. I don't think that there is any one uniting message that will unite everybody, because I think we are so polarized that some in the political landscape are not interested in just defeating their opponents in an election, but they want to destroy them, want to incarcerate them and destroy them. When I lived in Washington, D.C., and when I was working as a political consultant solely, I had many friends who were Democrats, but in the same business I was. And we would socialize together, we would eat together, we would drink together, we would hang out together, we would smoke dope together, we would tease each other, but it was all very good natured, and there was a certain civility, even though we disagreed. That has disappeared entirely from politics today. And those who are in both parties despise each other. More importantly, they want to destroy each other. And it's the politics of personal destruction. It is not what I have practiced, generally speaking, unless someone's crimes are so manifest that it's kind of obvious. So I don't have an answer for you. I don't know what kind of I don't know what you were arrested for to begin with, but I wish you well in your endeavors. Although people may hate you, many people may love you. As Nixon, I think, famously said, people may hate you, but you don't lose unless you hate them back. And I think that's a pretty good rule right there.
Yeah, well, according to the chat, he's an advocate supporter for the documentary Cuties, so that perhaps may be one of the reasons, but absolutely on that advice standpoint. So I think we're ready for the next question.
Yeah, I think you'll have a follow-up question that we can circle around to later, if that's okay.
Again, I've lost the sound.
Oh, can you not hear us? Testing. No, I don't think you can hear it. You might want to shoot him a text.
Just give him a second. It'll come back, I think.
While he's getting his set back up, I'm going to pull Max back in because I think he had a follow up. That should be pretty good. So give me a second, Max.
All right, we're back.
Awesome. Okay, give me just 2 seconds. I'm going to pull Max back in really quickly. Go for it.
Hello. Yeah, I was arrested for basically writing articles that were offensive to liberals at my college, the University of Colorado. But my follow-up question...
I didn't know that was a chargeable offense, but...
It's not. The charges were dropped, but it was... I was arrested for interference with faculty, staff, and students of an educational institution, also because I said we should empathize with mass shooters. Kind of going with what you were saying of not hating your opponents.
Well, I have no empathy for mass shooters, but I am a believer in the First Amendment, meaning I believe every individual has the right to express their view, no matter how repugnant or disgusting or distasteful or vile it may be. You do have a right to say it. Doesn't mean the rest of us have to accept it or like it. But that's the way the Constitution works.
I'm sure you're starting to get a feel for some of these internet characters. They have some very diverse beliefs. Doobie, are you ready to bring someone else in?
Sure. I think Max should have an actual question he wanted to ask. So we'll try it one more time, if that's okay. So yeah, Max, with your questions, should I put you on pretty please?
Sorry, I keep getting disconnected. I think Ben keeps kicking me out. But anyway, my last question is, if you could turn all those haters into lovers now, and be the uncontroversial Roger Stone, loved by all. I know this is what I want for myself. Would you do it?
No,
If you could do
because
it without selling out.
the only thing worse in politics than being wrong is being boring. And I think that being boring, you would never make your mark. So I'm not seeking to be loved. I am seeking to be respected. Those who hate me, I would kind of urge them to look in the Bible under Hebrews 10:30 through 31. Vengeance is reserved for the Lord. The old Roger Stone would be lying in wait, trying to decide how to get revenge on those who I believe have wronged me. I've forgiven those who wronged me. I've completely forgiven them. They will have to face God someday, in my opinion. But there's you burn up too many calories in hate. There's too much brain damage. I hate no one at this point. As some of you may know, my wife of 30 years has just had a horrific battle with stage 4 cancer. I am epically grateful that she's now fine, that she has beaten cancer, that she's in full remission. Something has to be watched very, very carefully. Therefore, I'm grateful to the millions of people who prayed for us, for the millions of Buddhists who chanted for us. My wife is a Buddhist, by the way.
Roger, I will. The last thing.
Yep.
I watched the documentary about you on Netflix.
Yep.
It's very clear that your family loves you, but I do not think that they think you're boring. So I disagree. I think they think you're interesting and they love you.
Well, that's certainly true. I thank you for your questions.
Thank you for your answers. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Max. I've got someone else lined up, unless you want to pull someone else in bed. Ben?
You can bring in the next person, actually.
Cool. Okay. Next person up is Buddy, another streamer friend of mine, very intelligent person. Buddy, whenever you're ready. Any second now, Buddy. I think you might pass out. That's okay. So next up, we'll go to a question that I had actually. I'm gonna steal a spot for myself. The question is, oh wait, there he is.
There's Buddy.
I'm so very sorry about that. I was opening a pop-up and the invite didn't pop up for myself. Rodger, it's an absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you. I was really curious about when Trump first made the decision or came to the decision to start to run. How did the initial conversation with you go? Did you approach him? Did he approach you? How did this decision go? And how was the initial campaign formed? Like, how did this transformation, so to speak, occur? Or did he more come to you with, these are my ideas, and you facilitate a way for this to be a possibility?
I first suggested that Trump might want to run for president as early as 1988 because he expressed a dissatisfaction with the choice then between George H.W. Bush and Michael Dukakis. I tried again in 2000 to get him to consider running for president, this time as an independent or candidate of the Reform Party. I tried again in 2012 to get him to challenge Mitt Romney, for whom I have a very low regard, and I was unsuccessful. But the thing you have to understand about Trump is that he's not a politician. He's a political figure. He's also very, very, very much his own man. He makes his own decisions. No one puts words in his mouth. He eschewed using a speechwriter. He eschewed using a teleprompter until the very end of his campaign. He does it his way. If you have an opinion, he'll listen to you. But you don't have, for example, the kind of reliance that, say, George W. Bush had on Karl Rove, or the kind of reliance that Barack Obama had on his Chicago-based consultants. The chief name escapes me at the moment. So Trump does things his way and in his way, and no one puts words in his mouth. He's not managed. He's not controlled. He's not handled. So, for example, in his announcement after he came down the escalator, his comments about our southern border and about the immigration problem, that was a surprise to all of us. That was not something that was planned. It was not something that was suggested. That was all Donald Trump.
How very interesting. Kind of an orthogonal question, if you don't mind. If someone was to want to get more involved with politics, a friend of mine, so to speak, is interested, is there any recommendation you might give an average Joe that wanted to try to make a change in the world in how to do that?
Yeah, if a man or a woman wants to get in politics, the best way is to go volunteer to work on the campaign of an individual that you support at any level, whether it's the county commission or the state senate or the state house or a campaign for Congress or a campaign for the U.S. Senate or ultimately a campaign for president. But the best way to get involved is to volunteer and get to see the process up close.
Very good. Again, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank Abe for putting this whole thing together. And thank you very much, Rodger, for your service to the country and to all of us, really.
Thank you.
Thank you, bud.
If I can steal a quick question here, Mr. Stone, if I was a betting man, I know you can't get into too much detail, but if someone were to consult you about making a bet on if President Trump will decide to run or not, would you tell them to bet their money that he will or bet their money that he will not?
Today, I say it's even money.
Okay.
I think it's a 50-50 proposition. I think he's, based on my conversation, he's inclined to do it. I think he wants to do it. But in politics, a year is a lifetime. In politics, a month is a lifetime. And we can't possibly know what the political situation will be 6 months from now. I read in yesterday's New York Post that Joe Biden says he's running for re-election. I kind of doubt that, but I could also be wrong. So if you were forced to place a bet, not that you know anything about betting, Ben, but if you did, I'd call it even money.
Okay. I would think minus 150, but I'll take that one.
Okay. So next person up, so I can find them here. Got a question about the education system in the United States. Okay, whenever you're ready, go for it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stone, for answering questions today. I wanted to ask, what is your opinion on the concepts of gender identity, gender role, and sexual orientation, which were created by a man known as John Money?
Hey, well, I'm going to assume that was a comedy special
I
question.
think he might have benefited from more of the education system in the United States.
That seemed like a prank question to me.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
I didn't move him in. I think let's bring in Polish, who's I don't know his first name, but I know that he's a stone cold conservative as far as I know, so I think he'll ask a real question.
Hi, how are you doing, Mr. Stone?
Excellent. Good evening.
My question is more about geopolitics, and I was wondering if you think that Joe Biden bears the responsibility for the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and one more question: would you believe that Ukraine would be capable of winning the war against Russia? Thank you.
I think that we are drowning in war propaganda. Anybody who thinks that the Ukrainians are kicking the shit out of the Russians has no idea what's really going on. I am not pro-Russian or pro-Putin. The Russian system is a brutal, authoritarian society. I myself have had members of my own family mowed down by Russian tanks in Budapest in 1956. That said, the reasons for the war in Ukraine are not what we're being told by this administration or by most of the media. In 1994, we signed a treaty with Boris Yeltsin representing the Russia, in which we agreed that we would not expand NATO to Ukraine. Let me define that more closely. That we would not seek to place offensive missiles aimed at Russia in Ukraine. We are doing exactly that today. The silos for those missiles are already built. Max Blumenthal, who's a left-wing progressive, but anti-war nonetheless, has done some of the best reporting on this. If you just simply listen to what Putin has been saying, he cannot afford to prop up a puppet government in Ukraine. He doesn't have the economic strength to afford that. That's not his goal. We now know yesterday the Defense Department finally admitted that we have as many as 46 bioweapons labs operating in Ukraine. The Russians do not want our bioweapons labs and whatever the hell it is that they are cooking up, and they do not want offensive missiles pointed at Russia. Consequently, I believe that if the Ukrainians would agree not to do those two things, that this matter could be settled. One other point. Ukraine is not a democracy. Stop saying that it is. After the last presidential election, Zelensky arrested the guy who ran second, arrested all the leaders of his party, and shut down the television stations that were critical of his campaign and his presidency. So this is an authoritarian regime, just like Russia. The loss of life is tragic. I think this would never have happened had Donald Trump been president. I do think that Ukraine has been a center for money laundering, has been a center for child sex trafficking. And I ask this obvious question. If you voted in the U.S. Senate to give $40 billion to Ukraine, why would you be opposed to having a U.S. Inspector General keep track of exactly where that money was going? Who could vote against that, Republican or Democrat? I would think that that would be an obvious yes vote. Yet when Rand Paul proposed that, it was voted down in the Senate, meaning that people don't want to know where that money is going. When we have 370,000 homeless veterans in this country, when we have a shortage of baby formula, when we have the kind of abject poverty that we have in some places in this country, I don't know how you justify giving $40 billion to Ukraine, most of which I'm virtually certain will be stolen. Reading today's New York Post and the New York Times, for that matter, they tell us that the Ukrainians are running out of bullets. They're running out of armaments. Well, how can that be? We just wrote them a $40 billion check. So I think that this war is illicit. No, I'm not a Putin lover. I don't love the Russians. They're every bit as authoritarian as, I don't know, the Ukrainians. But this could have been solved through diplomacy, and it has not been.
Just reading a question from another user, and this user is named Jerry. He wants to know, who do you think is more corrupt, the Biden crime family or the Clinton crime family?
God, I've written a book on the Clinton crime family. They are epically corrupt. Bill and Hillary would, of course, steal a hot stove. On the other hand, the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, which 31 current or former intelligence officers, including the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, insisted was Russian disinformation, turns out to be all completely accurate. I think that there needs to be a formal investigation to determine the answer to that question.
Awesome. So I've got somebody else. This is Kyla. She's another streamer. She's been streaming the AMA for all of her fans. Kyla, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Mr. Stone. I was listening, we were talking with Max. You mentioned that you used to be a hateful person, but you're not that way anymore. Are you kind of telling us that like you've changed?
I've most definitely changed. Having a near-death experience caused me to have a redemption in Jesus Christ. I'm not perfect, and that's for sure. And it is very easy to, if you're Sicilian as I am, to get your ire up. But I try to be a better person. Uh, I try to disagree. I can be a little pungent, but at this juncture in my life, I don't hate anybody.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess I'm just wondering then as well, what would be the steps that you would recommend to somebody who's having a major life change, kind of going forward? How do they enact those changes in their life?
Prayer. I mean, you can say that's, and a lot of elites will do this. They'll say, "Oh, that's a head fake. That's positioning. That's some kind of dirty trick by Roger Stone. That's not sincere." Look, I was looking at 7 to 9 years in prison in what I believe was a Soviet-style show trial. I most definitely did not lie to Congress to hide any Russian collusion because there is no Russian collusion to hide. And that was a death sentence at 68 years old, and with a lifetime history of asthma. I would have died, and I'd probably already be dead. And therefore, it is only through the power of prayer that I survived. President Donald Trump, pardon me, commuted my sentence in an election year over intense opposition from some around him directly. So, from my point of view, the Lord delivered me from my persecutors. And I really seriously used to think that the Bible was an antiquated, archaic, irrelevant historical document that really didn't tell you much. Part of the problem was that I was trying to read this old King James version of the Bible, and the language is very, very archaic and obtuse. It's hard to understand what they were trying to communicate. I read a Daily Walk Bible today that has a lot of annotations, a lot of explanations of the original writing. I find it very comforting. So, yes, I do believe in the power of prayer. I think it is prayer that has saved my wife's life. The doctors did not give her much chance of survival. She's doing extraordinarily well. So I consider myself blessed. Others can choose another course. I indicated earlier that my wife is a Buddhist. She finds great comfort in Buddhism. Buddhism is a philosophy rather than a religion. But each individual person, I think, has to kind of find their own way.
I have a quick question as well. Mr. Stone, you're a big advocate. I know you love pizza and whatnot. You're a strong hater of Chicago deep dish pizza, which sort of hurts my feelings. But where would you say is the best place that you have ever gone to get pizza?
I'm a big aficionado of a place called John's of Bleecker Street in New York City. It's a very unique form of pizza. But if I had to name the best in the country, it would either be, and these are arch rivals. Both of them are in New Haven, Connecticut. That is the mecca of great pizza. Worcester Street, it used to be the old Italian section. And there are two pizzerias that have been there since the 20s, Frank Pepe's and Sally's. They're directly across from each other. They are the same style. It's a specific Connecticut style of pizza. It's called New Haven style pizza. I would recommend either one of them. Strangely enough, I recently located a pizzeria in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a place you would not think would be extraordinary, called Andiamo's Pizza, that is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, absolutely must be checked out. I am an aficionado of great pizza. When I travel, I always ask the local people, what's the best pizza in town? And I try it. Now, pizza is a very subjective thing, as you know. Some people like it thicker, some people like it thinner, some people like more cheese, some people like less cheese. You're right, I'm not an aficionado of the Chicago style because it's a little too bready for me. But pizza's like sex. Even when it's bad, still pretty good.
It's a Stone's rule.
Awesome. So I've got someone else. This is another streamer friend of mine. We've got a lot of political streamers and just streamers in general listening to the AMA, hearing me have to say, streaming it for all their fans. Zonia, whenever you're ready. You just need to accept the invite in the stage. Any second now. I don't think it's gonna work. Okay.
Will this be the last streamer? I think
We've got a bunch of them, actually. I think there are like 3 more.
Well, try to get more of the average person, you know,
There's
in
Sonia.
here
There we
Weird.
go.
as well.
It pops the invite up in the background when you got the thing popped out. Anyways, hey, thanks. Hey, Roger. So, yeah, I'm probably going to get in trouble for just being on here. I've been getting a lot of crap from people about this, but I'm going to take one out of the old Roger Stone playbook and just embrace the villain role. Here's my question. So, well, there's a little bit of a preamble to it, but you've been quite open about disinformation being a powerful tool that you leverage. And there's no secret that disinformation has long been at the heart of US politics. But prior to you being more openly embracing and advocating for its use, there was sort of like an overall facade of decency that the American political body tried to foster, regardless of the sincerity of that facade. And I know that between you and some others, like Karl Rove, for instance, you were both sort of pioneers of being a little bit more openly unapologetic about using tactics like yours, and eventually becoming sort of trendsetters in the Republican Party, as well as the modern era of lobbying firms. And I know that that was also tried to be played down for a while by the Republican Party until, as time went on, little by little, they stopped really hiding it. Even today, the Democratic Party is not really doing so much to hide their own use of the same tactics, right? And so now I get that, like, the game is the game. Whatever you can fit within the confines of the law is technically fair play. But growing up through several decades now of kind of watching the political landscape evolve, I can see what is just this very obvious, continually growing, compounding confusion, distrust, paranoia, and hostility for our entire political landscape. And so I just only kind of see this getting worse. And what I'm kind of wondering is, like, is this manufacturing a sort of chaos that will continually erode the people's faith in being represented by any politician at all and exacerbate division among the people? And if so, do you have any concerns about your own role in that? And does it bother you? Or do you have faith or hope that at some point we'll find a sane equilibrium?
I hardly invented the genre. Last night, CNN had a special on, Sunday night on Watergate. I've written a book on the subject. I found 29 absolute falsehoods in an hour. It was that easy. So, truth is in the eye of the beholder. They would tell you everything they said was true. I've written 2 books on the subject. I know a number of things they said were flatly untrue. Back in the day of Abraham Lincoln, it was alleged in handbills that he was of mixed race. So this idea that Karl Rove, who I'm not much of a fan of, or or that I invented disinformation. Not true. Your boys will not be sent to any foreign wars. Franklin Roosevelt said that. If you like your current doctor, you can keep your current doctor under our plan. Barack Obama said that. Read my lips. No new taxes. George H.W. Bush said that. So there's a long. I did not have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. Bill Clinton said that. So this is the world we live in. It's a pop culture world. Um, who's the arbiter of truth? Certainly not CNN. Virtually nothing they report is true. I don't get my news from CNN. The same reason I don't eat out of the toilet. It is mostly fraudulent. It is overwhelmingly fake. I'm not saying, by the way, that this is a black and white situation. So I'm not arguing that everything you see on Fox News is a factual. But in a society in which, thanks to the First Amendment, at least to a certain extent, each individual is free to say whatever they want, and almost everyone believes that their opinion is the truth, then I would say the greatest single danger to our democracy is censorship. If you're not advocating hurting someone else, and you're not exploiting, children for sex, then I don't see why you should be banned on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and so on. But the thought police are censoring people. Democracy dies in darkness, the Washington Post tells us. Okay, good. When will Nancy Pelosi release the 1,400 hours of video footage of what happened on January 6th? How come they don't editorialize about that? So no, I'm not going to take the rap for our current devolution of discourse, other than to say I think it started long before I came along.
Awesome. Thank you, Roger. Thank you
We're,
so much.
we're gonna go ahead and bring in a Stone Cold Patriot, who goes by the name of Bear or Geo. So here he is, and hopefully he has a good question for us today.
Hey, Rodger. All right, so first, big thanks to Benjamin for setting this up. Did a lot here to get us here. But my question is, how have you built up such a big clientele and made it up with such a early on in your political career, you made it up with the big shots as Nixon, Reagan, and now Trump?
It's kind of one thing led to another. So I grew up in a non-political family. Neither one of my parents went to college. They were both high school graduates. My father had a blue-collar job. He was a well digger. He used an old-fashioned chop drill to drill artesian water wells for people. My mother worked as a part-time local newspaper reporter, but she was largely a homemaker. My parents had no interest in politics by and large, although they voted. I think they were nominally Republicans, but because John Kennedy was our first Catholic candidate for president, I think they probably voted for him. And I had, at that juncture, to the extent that I had any aspiration, I wanted to be an actor. And then in 1964, or 63 really, the woman who lived next door to us gave me a book called Conscience of a Conservative, which outlined a philosophy of personal freedom, small government, and maximum personal freedom. And I became interested in politics. And I became a 12-year-old but avid supporter of Senator Barry Goldwater in his campaign for president, in which, of course, he was decimated. After that, I began looking backwards and reading more about politics, and I began to study the 1960 election. I decided that I thought Nixon had been cheated out, but then I just on New York City. Wasn't hard to get the name of the law firm where he was practicing. I wrote him a letter telling him that I thought he'd been cheated out of the presidency, and that if he ever ran again, I wanted to be involved. He wrote back a letter, I still have it, which he said no, he was essentially finished with politics, but that if he changed his mind, he would be in touch. Of course, he was not finished with politics, and 2 full years later, I was contacted by one of his assistants, asked me if I was still interested in helping in the campaign. I said yes. I took the train into New York City for an interview, and they were in shock because I was 16 years old. They thought I was an adult. But I did get a job in 1968, essentially as a gopher. I worked out of the New York headquarters, delivering packages, going out for coffee, picking people up at the train station and bringing them to the office and so on. And in that incarnation, I got to see, some of the most important people in the political realm come and go. Nelson Rockefeller, Ronald Reagan, Everett Dirksen, William F. Buckley Jr., Billy Graham, and so on. It was a great experience. Then, because of those relationships, I went to college in Washington, D.C. I got a job in Nixon's reelection in 1972. I was 19. I was the youngest member of his reelection staff. I parlayed that into a job with the 76 Reagan campaign because Nixon and Reagan were both from Southern California. There was a great commonality in their staff members, also in their donors. The 76 campaign led me to my job in Reagan's 1980 campaign, in which I met Donald Trump and we became friends. That parlayed into my job in the 1984 campaign. Then that led me to work in the U.S. Senate for Senator Bob Dole. And of course, I had met Trump back in the Reagan days, began urging him to become a candidate for president. So I guess what I would say is one job or one opportunity led to another. Had I never written that letter as a 12-year-old at that point, I would never have had a career in American politics.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. Next up, we've got Marco. Marco, whenever you're ready. You just need to accept the invitation.
Hey, hello.
Hello.
Hey, hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, Marco, go ahead.
Hello. Sorry, good evening, Mr. Stone, and thank you to Abraham and Benjamin for realizing this AMA. Sir, my question is, among the Republican politicians whom you worked with as a consultant, who would you say was like the most tractable to deal with, and who was rather more biddable than the others? And I would say, I'd also ask you who was your favorite politics-wise, because I know that personally wise, maybe it's Nixon because of what you said earlier. He was close to you and your family, and because of that tattoo and all that stuff. And thank you.
It's a difficult question because they're all very different. The easiest to work with was Ronald Reagan, because he had come from an experience as an actor. He was very, very focused on his performance. He was not very interested in the nitty gritty and the small details of politics. As long as you did your job, he left that to you. He was not not very demanding, but he was very focused on his own performance. He was kind of a big picture guy, though. I mean, in other words, he was the master of his own fate. He was controlled by no one else. Nixon was a control freak. He wanted to control all aspects of politics, and therefore somewhat more difficult to deal with, more of a perfectionist. Trump is enormously fun to be with. He has a self-deprecating sense of humor. He is a very good-humored. Never seen him lose his temper. He can be very, very funny. He can be somewhat undisciplined, obviously. Extremely likable. If you force me to choose between the three, they're just very, very different. Reagan and Trump, both extroverts. Nixon, very much an introvert. Reagan and Trump had a certain physicality, a certain presence, a certain size. I don't mean physical size, but I guess I mean a presence, a command focus, as it were. Nixon could be very riveting in a large group, but he was very uncomfortable in a small group. So I can't choose a favorite among them. because they're all completely different. But I'm proud to have worked for all of them. With that, Ben, I'm going to ask that we wrap this up because I've had a long day, but I have enjoyed it enormously. For those of you who wanted to shout obscenities at me, I appreciate your fact that you did not do so, and I have enjoyed taking your questions.
Rodger,
well-
thank you so much for coming along.
Let's do another one
Absolutely.
soon.
Sounds like a plan. And like I said, make sure you guys go get your t-shirts. Go to the gym with a nice Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong hoodie. I'm doing it myself. Get yourself a mug. Go read Stone's Rules. You want to be a Stone Cold winner, you need to read Stone's Rules. StoneColdTruth.com, StoneDefenseFund.com. That's all I have to say. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Mr. Stone, for doing an AMA. It's quite the treat when a person such as your status comes onto the little old politics Discord and takes questions from the people, but people are spamming for you to run for president. I know that you're not going to do that, but you've won over a lot of the hearts of a lot of people, and I think that your conservative libertarianism is perhaps the most effective strategy in politics, and I think that, like I said, I'm just so happy that you made it and took all these questions.
Happy to be here. God bless you.
God bless you. Godspeed.
Talk to you later, Roger. The rest of you, thank you very much for coming along. I am going to be giving away 10 of Roger's books, signed books, at the end of this. So I'm going to ping for how to in the announcements for how to get involved in that giveaway if you guys are interested.
If I will say this, Doobie, and the next one we do, no more catering to the streamers with 4 viewers. We want to hear from the American people, not the redcoats, not the streamers. Also, I have some good news for you, ladies and gentlemen. I've officially been granted immunity on the server, as anybody in my room will also be granted immunity from the biased, radical moderators that take part in the server. God bless you. Godspeed. We will win. Stop the steal. That's all I have to say. Goodbye.
So really quickly, Benjamin. So, these bastards. So hopefully he comes back in. I hope he does. So we're opening up the other channels.
Okay, what's up? I'm back.
Really quick.
What do
So
you
we're
need?
opening up the other channels. So slowly you guys will be able to have access to those things again. And
I think Roger had fun. I think he wants to do another
yeah,
one.
it sounds like he had fun. Yeah, and we can definitely get that scheduled.
Whoever asked that incredibly long question, I know your viewer count's low on Twitch. That was not good. No. But that's all I'd like to say. And we got to make sure, though, Doobie, on a serious note, we appeal to the people, the users, not the streamers, not the special elitists, as you would call them in this field. The people of the server.
Well, here's the thing, though. I think the streamers, Roger talks a lot about getting involved in politics.
Can I say
think the
something?
streamers
Let me
are
just
people who are
let
getting
me just
involved
say
in
something.
politics.
Let me just say something. I don't know why Budical's husband's adding me to appeal to some females when he's dating a transgender lady. That's not really a good argument. Now, you need to appeal to the people of the server. You need to appeal to the people that make it active. It wasn't
you're right.
450 streamers. Okay, it was about 450 active patriotic users and some liberal, and some agreed with Roger. We don't need to hear their long paragraph questions. Nobody cares. Go watch their stream if you want that. We hear them all day, those little weirdos, Vosh, the cutie supporter, Destiny, L, Bozo, plus ratio. Nobody cares. We will win. We want the people, and we are what makes the server great. That's why I'll never be a mod here, but that's why I represent the Stop the Steal movement. Okay, Doobie? So I'd like you to apologize if you can.
I think you're right. So in keeping with Stone's rules, Goldie, Benjamin, business is business. Thank you for getting us the AMA.
Well, there's another Stone's rule.
We're not interested in having you on anymore.
There's
the rest of you. I'm going to, like I said, open up the rest of the channel. Goldie's banned permanently for being a smug bitch. And yeah, we're gonna move on. Love you guys. I know a lot of you guys are upset that I just banned him. He won't be unbanned. I think that if you're going to be, I really appreciate him getting us in touch with Roger Stone, but if he's going to use the leverage that gave him to treat people badly, to try to get immunity to say slurs on the server, he can literally suck my whole penis. So yeah, there you go. And again, in keeping with Roger Stone's other roles, it's better to be infamous than not famous at all. So if you're mad at me, also suck my dick. Unless you're a child, in which case, get your mother to suck my dick. I don't care. Okay, love you guys. Hopefully they have a on the dropper now. Eventually, slowly. Okay, I'm gonna close the stage. Love you guys. Have a good day.